Go right here. Feel it. Connect with it, right. When I'm having those moments, I ask myself, I really play with my inner child. If you want to unlock some secrets, connect with that inner child. Okay, what do I need right now? Why am I upset? Okay, what am I feeling? Okay, what am I feeling? And there's sometimes saying there.
Welcome to Impostrix Podcast Season 4. My name is Whitney and I am your host. Thanks for joining us for this episode. I am excited to jump into it. Impostrix Podcast validates professionals of color navigating imposter experiences and racial toxicity within their careers. And this season, we are focusing exclusively on pouring into Black women. How can we take care of the Black women in our lives? If we are a Black woman, how can we pour into ourselves? How can we receive the pour from others? So this episode is going to be about that and all the episodes within this season. So sit back, get your listening ears on. Let's get into it. Welcome back to Impostrix Podcast Season 4. I am your host, Whitney Knox-Lee. I'm here today with Michelle Houghton, and I'm a little nervous about this conversation, not bad nervous, but because today what we're talking about is grief and trauma. And it wasn't until this conversation, the pre-recording conversation that I had with Michelle, that I connected the two of grief and trauma. So for me, this is going to be a big learning episode. And I'm excited to see what comes out of that and what I discover about myself. Hopefully, it'll be the same for you as you're listening to this conversation. So I'll tell you a little bit about Michelle. She is a trauma-informed life coach and the founder of a Life After Loss Academy. Her coaching business is deeply rooted in her personal experiences with trauma, beginning with the tragic loss of her father before she turned 1. This early loss fueled her lifelong quest for healing and wholeness, leading her to become a certified life and health coach. Through her work, she empowers others to break through the barriers that trauma imposes, enabling them to achieve their life goals and embrace their full potential. And I asked Michelle, as we were kind of gearing up here, what identities are you really focused on right now? And she says her Blackness. And so, Michelle, I would love for you to give in your words, who are you? What are the perspectives that you're bringing to this conversation?
Well, thank you, first of all, Whitney, for allowing me to be here, allow me to share about what we're going to talk about. Um, Really, you hit the nail on the head. Being myself and really walking in this person who I am, seeing behind the mirror, looking at myself. I grew up in a in a predominantly white community. Oftentimes, I was the only Black kid in the school or in the classroom. So everything that I should have been able to just connect with and be beautiful, I felt that it was ugly. I was always ashamed of. So now, as I am rocking this bald head, this was also something that I had to really connect with. I suffer from an anxiety where I pull my hair out due to unhealed trauma. So really taking that initiative to shave my head, to show up authentically as myself, and really start loving those imperfections that I once thought was ugly and heinous and wanted to move from, I'm now just loving. So I really have to see that as my identity. It's just being Black, being me
Oh,
unapologetically, I have to
yeah. So,
say.
and what I'm appreciating about this, I have hair issues. I have hair anxiety, like a lot of Black women. This is part of the trauma that
Mhm.
we live with is I mean, who likes their hair these days, right? Maybe by the time we are 37, which is my age, we like our hair. We at least might know how to deal with our hair at this point. Um, but we talk about it like dealing with our hair, like I just said.
Mhm.
And for me, I've gone through periods of shaving my head and feeling liberated by shaving my head, but then being upset because I felt like I wasn't feminine and I wanted to feel feminine or, all of these things. And so for you, what I heard you say was that I have anxiety and so I pull my hair. And so to take care of myself, I shave my head. And I think that when I'm considering, like, pouring into self, that is, like, the epitome of it. It doesn't necessarily have to mean giving myself something or doing something elaborate or that costs a lot of money or anything like that. Like, what is gonna make my life easier right now?
Right.
And is that shaving my head? Because then I'm gonna have all these other feelings once I start pulling my hair and, all of these things, and I really I love that for you, that that was a conscious decision that you made, and I hope that, um, you're loving that decision. You look great with the bald head.
Oh, thank you, thank you. The reason why I love it, and here's why, is what it signified, what it really meant. Because I would wear wigs. I was a wig wearer, but I hated it. I hated how
Oh.
it felt. I hated that it was hot. I hated everything about a wig. But I also didn't like the bald patterns that I had in my hair. So it was really about stepping into this new person that I am. And I'm conflicted. I was really intentional. I was like, what do I want? And it literally started from, I just want to be comfortable.
Mm,
If that means being able to walk out of my front door without grabbing a hat, grabbing a wig, just saying, I just want that. So that was
mm.
something that inspired me to just go, you know what? I went to my husband and I said, can you shave my head? He goes, are you serious? I was like, yeah, I think I'm ready.
Wow, and was there a journey for you in terms of your self-image with being bald?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, I think as women, we connect our hair to femininity.
Yeah.
It's a beauty mark. And what I learned was the hair is really our story, our journey, how to connect to it, how to just really align with our higher self, and that I can still have that and be as beautiful without the hair. And I challenged myself. I was like, you know what? If you think that you can command a room with hair, let's see how you command that room being bald. Right. And
Mm.
sometimes we have to have those fun games with ourselves to just kind of motivate. So that's what I had to do. I had to really say, your femininity isn't based off of your hair. You know,
Right.
still put your head up and still do what you do. Be Michelle, and that has really allowed me to be able to just be like, "Shh," and then walk outside. But it was tough. It was
Yeah.
real tough.
Yeah. Oh, um, everything, everything. So I think people who are listening to this who have done the big chop, whether they're black or not, can probably relate to then needing to because okay, so you said you started with comfort. And when I thought comfort, I was like, yes, shaving my head was like that was great and it was comfort, except for then there was the internal
Mhm.
stuff going on around, am I pretty? Am I pretty like this? Um, so anyways, this
No,
is
I
not
love
what we're
that. I love
talking
that.
about.
It kind of falls in line. It's perfect because often that stigma is ingrained by a lived experience that is allowing us to show up in that way. That's our adaptation. So being told that we are pretty, being dark skinned Black women that we are beautifully now looking at ourselves, we weren't always told that.
Mm-mm.
That's an ingrained trauma. So that's exactly what we're speaking about, is really honing into those, pouring back into ourselves those affirmation things like, girl, you know what, you are beautiful. I don't
Mhm.
care what they say. I love that about you. So it's exactly that switch of what we're discussing. So I love that.
Mm. Well, thanks for starting us off with this. We're talking today about grief and trauma. And so I want to start before I even to start talking about how my mind was blown when we were having conversation. I was having light bulbs flying all over the place. Before I even go there, let's just break it down first and talk about grief. Like, what is grief?
Okay, so grief, first let's talk about trauma.
Oh,
Trauma is the
okay. Let's
experience that
talk
you go
about
through.
trauma.
Okay,
Yes.
let's talk about trauma because that's your lived experience. And what you go through, that experience, then you have that grief. Grief is the emotional connection to what was lost during that traumatic experience.
Okay.
So how I often describe it is, I watched this documentary on Swiss cheese on how it was made, and I never knew that when you make Swiss cheese, that's a solid mass. I always thought Swiss cheese had holes from its conception, and when I realized, like, oh wow, it's actually solid when you make Swiss cheese, and then I was like, wait, that's kind of like our reflection in our life. We are like a solid mass, and then as we go through lived experiences, we lose parts of ourselves. And
Mm,
that part of ourselves we are now grieving. Grief shows up in our 5 stages. You have, anger, depression, bargaining, acceptance. And when we are going through that, we often don't correlate the two. We went
mm,
through this experience and we're stuck and we're like in this anger or whatever, and we're like, wait a second, this is an emotional response. So allow that to just kind of be your beacon of light. But both things correlate and exist. And that's how you start to really identify within yourself what is what, and really work on those belief systems around grief and trauma.
and so I grief is a newer emotion or experience for me in terms of like knowing that right now this is grief and being able to
Mhm.
identify it. And it wasn't after a time of losing a person, which is what, I'm looking for when I'm thinking about am I grieving? It's like, well, ain't nobody died.
Right.
Um, it was relating to work and grieving the end of, a period in my life of working for, this company that I thought was a dream company and it wasn't a dream company. And that was a very intense grieving process for me that I was not prepared for. I did not I did not expect for that to happen and I was not prepared for it. But so I would love for you to talk a little bit just about the kinds of situations where we might experience grief, because like I mean, prior to maybe last year, I would not have identified really anything other than losing a person, like death,
Right.
as a experience that I would grieve.
I agree. And I was the same way. And that is something, Life After Loss Academy, that's where I got that name from, is when I realized that grieving isn't something that you do in the physical form. I challenge everyone to look at their life as a whole, because it's your lived experience when you lose something. And we have to stay real clear on the definitions of words. Grief is the emotional connection to something that you lose. When my oldest son, went away to college, I was grieving that. No one ever prepared me. I didn't even know that was a thing.
Mm,
I was sitting on my couch. So I was sad. You see the signs, you see the depression, you see it all. I didn't lose anyone physically,
wow.
right? Um, I also explain oftentimes I was sexually assaulted growing up. I was in the military. I was raped growing up. No one died during that interaction, but I damn sure lost something.
Mhm.
I grieved what I lost. That's that emotional connection. And then we have to remember that emotion, what that is energy in motion. So when we are finding ourselves stuck in these patterns of grief, we need to just connect to, okay, what am I feeling in this moment? If I know that emotion is just energy in motion, let me connect to my body and see what I need to do to relieve this. Let me
Mm,
connect to the sensation and see what it brings me to, this awareness. What is this lived experience? And what is it that I've lost and I'm grieving that I need to give honor to? And then once you get to that moment, then with intention, you can say, okay, what do I want to put back?
mhm. Mhm.
What do I want to gain? So when it comes to career, it's like, okay, this just left me. This idea is what I'm now grieving because it looks
Mm,
different. This life that I once envisioned
yeah,
now
yep,
doesn't look this way. So I'm
yeah.
now grieving that.
So let's pause a minute and just get real. You do everything for everybody. But have you taken a moment to care for future you? Getting your affairs in order isn't just about wills or trusts, it's about peace of mind for you and love for those that you leave behind. Ideally, we should all have an estate plan. And if you're in Georgia, Wills for the People can help you out. But If you're not ready yet to create your will or trust, there's something that you can do that will go a long way in helping the future you, and that is to get organized. The I Plan for This Life Organizer for when it's needed is a workbook designed to help you organize your life with clarity and ease, making it so that if someone needs to care for you or for your affairs because you're not able to, they have all of the information that they need. No stress, no confusion, just a record made by you, about you. Visit willsforthepeoplega.com to get your copy, because you deserve to be prepared and to have your loved ones prepared. Again, that's willsforthepeoplega.com, and click on the workbook tab. Back to the show. I maybe the first two times that I remember that thought, that this life that I envisioned doesn't look this way or might not look this way, is around parenthood. And my first child, my first pregnancy, we found out at 20 weeks, they thought that he was going to be one of the trisomies, the trisomy that it was not going to survive. And so for those that aren't familiar, the trisomy is some chromosomal abnormalities that they can detect in utero, and you can choose to get these tests done to tell you like the likelihood of your child having one of these trisomies. And our likelihood was high, was what the test result came back for. And I remember receiving that phone call at work, and grief, I guess. I mean, I couldn't even explain, like, I couldn't talk. I remember going into my coworker's office and, like, I was bawling, I could not talk. Um, and it was an idea, right? Because this child had not come to be yet. It was someone, a thing, an organism that I was carrying, but one that I had not met and that had not come to be, and all I had lived with thus far, as the life that we were creating, was the dreams that I had about the life that we were creating. And then the second time was when my second child, so the first child wound up being fine. He did not have trisomy. He's alive. He's 7. Um, the second child was diagnosed with autism when he was 18 months old, very young. And at 9 months old is when we learned that he was behind on every single milestone. And at that point, because it was every single milestone, it could have literally been anything that was afflicting him. And so, again, it was okay, now I need to have completely different expectations for
Mm-hmm.
this boy child. And both times, it's only now that I'm putting the G word with that. Um, and so I'm wondering around like our awareness, how do we build awareness to know that
Great
what I'm
question.
feeling is grief? Like
That's a great
you
question.
you talked about what I basically just thought was empty nester syndrome. Like, and it's something that we talk about, empty nesting.
Hmm.
And I'm not at that age yet where my kids haven't left, but I've not once ever heard anybody describe grief in this process that we have normalized to be like, okay, yeah, the parents are going to be a little emotional during this time, because now their kids are gone, but they be fine. They're going to pull up their big girl panties and like, but to hear you talk about that you experienced grief during that time, I wonder, like, how do we build our awareness? Because, so often as Black women, I'm
Mm.
realizing that we are grieving. We are so fatigued. I am so fatigued right now, and a big part of my fatigue is the energy that I am spending grieving. Um, a lot of things, a lot of ideas and dreams and hopes that I had for my community, for my country, for Black people, for Palestine, for all of the things. So yeah, 3 minutes ago I asked the question, how do we build this awareness?
I love it. No, and thank you for asking this question. And our beliefs, how we look at the world, how we approach the world, how we show up as ourselves, our belief systems, our identities really stem from our lived experience from 0 to 6 years old. So how you're
Mm,
showing up now, your adaptations to the world is really right there in that area of your life. So, if you want to know why am I showing up this way? For me, I'm going to use myself as an example. I showed up in anger
mm,
oftentimes when I needed to so first, let's talk about the way that we show up, our trauma responses. So, you have freeze, fight, flight, right? And when we are in our trauma response, that's how we're going to show up. We can often tell when we are in that trauma response because then we start getting triggered. Our triggers can be, I call them people, places, or things, right? Our triggers can be
mhm,
so many things. It can be an environment, it could be a person, it could be a smell, it could be a song. We can be triggered by so much. And then that trigger, once we can kind of see, like if we get irritable, right? We kind of hone into the emotion that we are now exuding, then that will be the key to allow you to kind of go backwards. Allow yourself this freedom, this I always tell myself, if you want to learn how to start healing, you first have to put your nervous system in a place of safety. And in order to get safe, you have to allow yourself to be curious. Why do I say be curious? Because then you're not holding any judgment. I tell you, and if you want to challenge me on this one, it sounds funny, but when you're eating food and you're at a potluck and you see something and you're looking at it and you're like, oh, I don't know about this. But you allow yourself, you already know, you allow yourself to be curious. So you put it up to your mouth, you do a little sniff test, the eye test, but still you might not know what it is, but you allow yourself this ability to take what we call a polite bite. You might find out you like it, you might not like it, but you still allow yourself to just be curious about what it is that you're going to experience. So that is the same way with our healing. So we have to understand what our triggers are and be like, oh, this is bothering me. So I showed up in anger. So whenever
mhm,
I would start to feel that anger in my body, like I would feel it first. Your body keeps score. Everything that you feel, like if you have a sensation, a pain that comes up, that might be a trigger. That's something that's telling you. And then you really just say, okay, now what is this? Allow yourself to be safe. Journal write, you know, connect with it, breathe with it. And then you'll be able to just allow yourself to see, what is this experience reminding me of? And what do I need in this moment? That is when you'll be able to start healing that grief. Is
mm,
identifying it. But the most important thing is you have to bring yourself back to this level of safety. We have to start healing our vagus nerve system. And it's not spoken about a lot. And that was one of the things that is the catalyst to healing our grief and trauma. Is we have to go to the source, and the source is inward. It's our nervous system. How do we do that? Is we take ourselves from understanding that freeze, fight, or flight. Okay, what is it in my life? I have a wonderful worksheet that I do where we're doing that. We're looking at our past experiences. What did I lose from the ages of, 0? Guess what? We're Black women. We have generational trauma.
right,
We are
negative
bringing
ages.
things in
Yeah,
from before the womb that we are still. And if you don't believe me, it's like, how often are we walking down the street and we see someone who is not African American and we just instinctively move to the side? We do that because it's ingrained in us out of safety, out of fear of safety, right? We have a lot of traumas that we're still trying to process. So we have to really spend time and ask ourselves, okay, what type of lived experiences did I go through? And then what thought process or belief system did I adapt because of this? What was
Mhm.
I not getting? Was I not safe? And so now, whenever I have this response to something, it's because my body is remembering those moments when I was younger, or remembering those situations. And now my body is doing what it needs to do and it wants to keep me safe. So now I'm showing up in a trauma response. It's not
Yeah.
how we want to, but that's how we have this cycle.
I wanna pause here because I'm thinking about that this is work. I'm thinking about that this is work. I had a therapy appointment this morning, and I feel like you were in my therapy appointment, because we were talking about, um, these, childhood patterns or the ways that we coped with things that we, can trace back now, how we're responding to things. But what I wanted to pause around was this idea that, so often when we talk about self-care or we talk about, my language of pouring into ourselves, for this season, um, I want it to be fun.
Mhm.
I want it to be light and easy and airy, or I'm laying down and taking a nap. That's how I'm caring for myself today, which is great.
Absolutely.
And this though is not that. And what I'm hearing you describe is a kind of backing into the feeling of discomfort that we are having. W
Mhm.
Identifying that we're having that feeling of discomfort. You mentioned irritability, which is I am an irritability person. I'm an alcoholic, so hungry, angry, lonely, discontent, like,
Yeah.
irritable. And leaning into that to figure out the why. And then if I understand you correctly, once I'm able to pinpoint what is it that had happened, like, today that is making me irritable today, then I can start thinking about, am I experiencing a grief? Am I experiencing grief from the thing that happened today, or was there some kind of trauma in the past and I'm still grieving something that was lost, but I didn't really know that it was that big of a deal. I
Mhm.
didn't give it that time, and maybe now it's time to reprocess, uh, once I find that safe place. And I think that this really caring for ourselves, really holding ourselves is absolutely necessary for that work. And that it strengthens our ability to hold and care for ourselves. That's kind of like a one thing can't happen without the other, as far as like finding the safe place, but also we're building the safe place as we're finding it so that as we continue to dig, our safe place becomes um, more and more of a shelter.
Yes. I like to refer to it as critter brain. Our critter brain wants to keep us safe. It's kind of if you remember the Disney movie Tarzan, and the little character says, "Are you sure this water is sanitary?" That is our critter brain. It's like, "Are you
Mhm,
sure this is safe? I want to keep us safe here." Right? Subconsciously, if we are holding on to something that we're not ready to move forward and process subconsciously, we're going to feel it. It's going to be that anxiety. We're going to feel those emotions kind of kick up. And when we do have those responses to it, that's when I say we're going to have to really just go back to what people have now has told us. Oh, don't do this. Grab a pill, grab a this, go to
mhm,
that alcohol. I was an alcoholic. That was the way that my vice. I would get something to drink, because it was easier for me to kind of cope through it. But now I'm saying, you know what? No, go right here, feel it, connect with it. Right when I'm having those moments, I ask myself, I really play with my inner child. If you want to
mhm,
unlock some secrets, connect with that inner child. Okay, what do I need right now? Why am I upset? Okay, what am I feeling? Okay, what am I feeling? And there's sometimes saying there. One time and this has been a lot of work, and I've asked myself over and over again, and my saying is love yourself through discovery and healing, because each time you
mhm,
go inward, you're going to discover something different, and
mhm,
you're going to
mhm,
discover something different about yourself, about the environment, about the people. You're going to look at people differently because you're elevating differently. But the more you're doing the work, you're going to notice that it's working when things that used to irritate you, you're like, oh, wait, that didn't really bother me as bad. I'm showing up differently. The way that I'm showing up is actually what is more in alignment with how I want to show up. And that's because you're doing the work. You're working backwards. You're asking yourself, well, what do I want in this moment? Instead of being scared, frightful. And most importantly, I think when I was doing my trauma informed coaching certification, I heard something that blew me. And it was, when we're speaking about emotions, people put labels to that. Oh, you're feeling fear. Did your body tell you that was fear? Or did someone who's not even in your body say that was fear?
Hmm.
Right? It might be something else. It might be that feeling that's saying, oh, this is it. This is it. You're walking into your purpose. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? So, really connecting and rewriting some of these emotions for yourself and how it shows up for yourself is huge. But most importantly, allowing yourself that freedom to be curious.
Mm.
It's that curiosity that's going to allow you to get to that safe space.
What can we do to build our safe space? Because I am putting myself in the position of our listeners. They're driving down the road, they listening to this
Mhm.
on the radio, they're like, "Okay, Whitney and Michelle, I get it, like, there's grief in the world, there's grief in me, there's grief around, blah, 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 and I need to work through this grief, I guess."
Mhm.
Um, and I hear you, but Imma turn off this episode and continue on with my life when you guys are done talking. Um, and then there are those that are gonna be like, "Yes, they are so right, like, I absolutely need to like, there's this thing. I know that there's a thing. I know that something's going on. I don't know what. I don't know why. I don't know how to access it, and I don't even know that I have the tools to, like, hold myself while I do that." Um, and so I think what I wanna do is share some tools that people can use to ease into this, whether or not you're
Mhm.
someone who doesn't like it's not time
I love
for you
that.
to connect like this.
I love
Or
that.
if you're somebody like, yeah, it's definitely time, I just don't know what I'm doing. I just don't know. I'm not safe. I am not safe to go into this right
Okay.
now.
Here's something that you can do right now in the moment. If you're in the situation where you're responding, you're in a trauma response. It's, you're either in the fight, you're in a flight, you're disassociating, but you're aware that what you're feeling in this present moment isn't what you want to feel, and you want to quickly get yourself back to a place of calm. It's something that our ancestors has done, and we do it every day. Humming, the
Mm,
simple mm. Just hum to yourself, because what that does, it creates a frequency in your body that really promotes stress relief. It gets into that mind and that body. So if you're in that stress response, start humming. That is something you can do right now. It's free. Take it with you.
and why can't I can't hear somebody humming without going straight to Negro spirituals. I just
Absolutely.
and to church and, like, for me, that's home. Like, for me and I don't do church like that, but I did grow up in a Baptist church, and for me, there are sounds that sound like home, and humming some specific spirituals is home.
Yeah. When I learned that that is actually scientifically proven to take your body from that trauma response straight into that stress free response, I said it makes sense now. It makes sense because we're naturally going into the rhythm of our body. Once we start doing that and trusting ourselves, that's a big thing. Trust yourself. If you want to know, the biggest way for self love is self trust.
Mm,
That is one of the biggest way you can really start. It's just really going in with yourself.
wow. Okay, so trauma. I think trauma by at this point is a word that most people are familiar with having navigate. Like
Mhm.
we know that we probably experienced trauma. We hear about trauma informed services or advocacy or the thing. Um, and I wonder if we can circle back to just what you had started out by saying around trauma and grief and their relation. now that we've had a chance to talk a little bit more about grief itself. Can you tell us again, like, what is this ball of trauma and grief? How are they related? Um,
Yeah.
and are they necessary together? Like, are these two sides of a coin?
It is. It's duality. Both things are existing same time. And I love how you brought attention and awareness to the word trauma. And it was something that I also wanted to challenge myself as well when speaking about it, because I don't, it's like trauma, trauma, trauma. A lived experience, that when you're going through something that is a lived experience that is causing you pain, that is trauma. Grieving is really that emotional connection.
Okay.
And once we put the correlations together, it's like, okay, I was in a car accident. That's the traumatic experience. Now, the aftermath, this life after this experience, that is what I now have to connect with. That is what I now have to identify with, because world looks so different. I often speak of the big, bigger, and biggest things of the healing process. The big thing is going through the actual lived experience, right? That's the big thing. Wow, my world is different. The bigger thing is realizing everyone's life still exists the same way, but now I'm in this parallel universe and I'm the only one feeling this, and now I have to figure this shit out, right?
Mm,
What do
mhm,
I
mhm.
do? And the biggest is now I have to go back to that lived experience. Take what serves me, take what I learned, take the things that I want to apply presently and into the future. And I have to learn how to leave the things that no longer serve me, because those are the things that are holding me back. Those are my limited beliefs. Those are the things that are becoming roadblocks. Those are the things that my ideas and beliefs that no longer are serving me, other people's trauma, because we have to also remember that we are living our lives individually, and so are other people. And
Mm,
so other people are living through their unhealed trauma as well. And they might be impacting, I call it the lie between the BS. Sometimes we are experiencing other people's unhealed trauma and their perception of us, and we're applying that too. So we have all of these different areas of trauma that we are now trying to kind of maneuver through. But that's the important thing. Is the big thing is going back to that experience, taking what serves me, creating new habits and boundaries over the things that no longer serve me, being okay to say, you know what,
mm,
now I'm aware, and then applying and making your present day and your future day just be exactly what it is, and having the tools, because I often say life is gonna life,
yeah.
right? I cannot guarantee that you're not going to experience trauma. You're going to. That's one thing that I can tell you. You're going to experience life. But by having these tools, understanding how you show up, you're going to know what tool you need for when you need it. Just like if you have a tool bag, you know what a hammer is for, you know what a screwdriver is for.
Mm,
You're going to understand, like, this technique works for me. Meditation works for me. Going out and doing this works for me. Meditating works for me, right? So it's all about allowing ourselves the opportunity to discover what it works for us and then applying it. And it might be decolonizing,
yeah.
right? There are
A
so many things that we have to really say, okay, this isn't what it's in line with me, and it's tough.
a couple of things. First, I was thinking as you were talking, one of the kind of bigger trauma discoveries that I've had this year is around a childhood trauma that at the time did not feel very traumatic. And in my adulthood, it's not that it was a sexual assault. It's not the assault itself that I'm even able to access. Maybe there was, like, maybe I'll get there and it will be traumatized, or like I'll feel the trauma, I'll feel the grief. But right now, it's being in what I call the rape kit room. The room in the hospital where you are getting examined after a sexual assault. Being in that room alone for hours as a child is the trauma that, when I think about my traumas, that is a defining point in my life. And I didn't realize that until recently. Of all of this cloud of all of these things that similar to the emotions that the outside voices are saying, "This is so bad. This thing that happened was is horrible. Um, this is the thing that is causing your trauma. This is what you are going to therapy about." I ain't never been therapized about the rape kit room. Like, I need somebody to come therapize me about the rape kit room because it was a isolated, um and it wasn't
Situation?
even what was that?
Yeah. It was like an isolated situation. It was
Yeah. Yeah,
so
and it was, a young girl by herself in this white room for hours, just existing after this supposedly traumatic
yeah.
thing happened, but, like, not in a way where I could even put my own words of this was a traumatic thing, you know? Like, to me, it was just
I
like,
get it.
"Mm." So
Have you,
that's
um
one thing.
have you ever was curious about it? Have you sat down and said, "Okay, what is it about this?" Sweetheart, remember I told you you have to get connected to that inner child. I talked to mine. I'm sorry. I talked to mine. I have to. But okay, what is it about this? What are you showing me? What are you afraid in this moment? Because we have to get comfortable with it because that's you.
Yeah, yeah.
You have to get comfortable with you because you tapping into the things that you're connected to, that's okay, that you will, when you feel safe, you're subconsciously, you will be allowed, your capacity to handle more
Mm,
things is going to be opened. So
mhm,
now when you're sitting there like, girl, I didn't even know that I was, because your subconscious mind is saying yes, because now you're healed enough to venture there.
mm,
That's why we have to trust ourselves.
right,
So you've
right.
opened that up, spend some time journaling and be like, okay, girl, what is it about this? And remember the cheese analogy. What was lost here?
Right. Yeah, and I'm working on that.
Have fun.
And
Have
I
fun
think,
with it
like,
though.
the whole thing surprises me because of how we talk about trauma. I really, really related when you're and a friend of mine also talked to me about this of especially people who have PTSD, who have the isms, the depression, the whatever it is. We have the labels.
Mhm.
Um and we go and we seek help for the things, we share our story, and then we are told what of our story is traumatic. Um, and then we carry on through life feeling like a disconnect. I carried on through
Mhm.
life feeling a disconnection between what I was told the trauma versus what is actually the trauma. And it's not that what I was told the trauma wasn't didn't impact me, but I'm focused on this other thing over here. And I just think for if that's helpful for anyone else or talking about grief and trauma is just again that the going inward to see what is actually true for you. What is actually true for you. The other thing that as you were talking I thought of, you talked about, maybe this is you said decolonization and I this subject of trauma, grief, and Black women is particularly interesting to me because if I'm dealing with grief right now, and that is why I am fatigued and tired all the time and irritable, and I just want to shrink into myself and not take on the world's problems,
Right.
what is the trauma that I am also have just experienced or am experiencing? And in this 2025,
Right.
after the last 5 years, really? Even I would say starting like it has been a racial roller coaster since in my life since Obama was elected.
Mhm.
And it's because maybe the age that I was when Obama was elected and the awareness I was in college, my Blackness became a big deal to me. Um,
Mhm.
I started having other Black friends similar to you. I grew up around lots of white people. And so my Blackness became a really big deal, and my other identities that were not majority identities. Um, and so being able to celebrate and then being let down, by politics, period. And then the journey that we've been on since then, the killings, the murders, the lynchings in the streets, the Black women needing to be the backbone of the Democratic Party and save, quote, the United States from itself type of
Right.
thing. Um, the misogynoir, the suicides of Black women in higher education, the dismantling of affirmative action, the Roe versus Wade, like, so much has gone on over the past 15 years that when I
Mhm.
take a step back, and these are all events that have shaped my identity. I'm a millennial. This is my entire adulthood,
Yeah.
of this roller coaster. And starting to think about and maybe accept or acknowledge this experience as traumatic, um, I think is where my brain, like, I'm currently in a moment of pondering this, like, the trauma of this moment coupled with the trauma of my ancestors, coupled with the fear of knowing that I'm still Black, like, and they still ain't
And
changed out
reminded every day and
there.
reminded
Mhm,
of it every day.
mhm,
Um, that is something that I struggle with a lot. I have 2 sons and a daughter. My oldest is going to be 22, my middle is 13, and my middle is going to be 16, 2 boys, and my youngest is 13, a girl. My girl is like me. She is a firecracker. She came out that way. She's a fire sign. And I see even in this era, um, things that are just naturally hers. Her spirit is trying to be diminished by perceptions of, you know, she's mixed, she's biracial, and she lives dark passing. She looks mixed, and she has to say, no, my mom's Black. She still is having these struggles that we're just
mm,
like, I thought we were past this by now, right? But we're not. And when I look at everything that we experience as Black women, um, all the labels that we put on ourselves that we have to solve and do, and right now in 2025, I say no, I don't. And here's the reason why. I'm going to be 45 this year, and that's a lot of trips around the sun, and I'm hoping to have more. But when I was not myself is when I was walking through different masks, showing up differently for different situations, being a people pleaser. And that was more work than just showing up as myself.
mm,
That took more out of me. And and with really connecting, processing this grief, processing everything that we are told as a society of Black women that we are wrong, even from our own parents, our grandparents, things that I was a child that I will give you some wisdom. I'm a double Virgo. So when you are around me, I'm like, let me tell you, I done heard something tell me about you, and I didn't even know what I was talking about as a child. But but my mom would say my friends did not like being around you because you're always telling them what they need to be doing in their lives, right?
mm,
And I'm like, well, was I wrong? And she's like, no. However, but we have to get to this place in our acceptance that we are beautifully made. And
mm.
what society wants us to be more disconnected from is because it's our power. The more we go
Yes.
inward and start putting together, oh, wait, now that I'm aware of what makes me tick, now that I'm aware of what BS belief systems that are not mine, that came from your unhealed self, your colonized belief, this, that, another that is not of mine, and now I'm able to then disassociate from that. Now I know what a chakra is. Now I know what, grounding is. Now that I know, you know what I mean? Now that I know that words have meaning, you know what I mean? We have this awareness. I understand what a trauma response is. The simple things, like even you mentioned, like someone wanted to turn this off, like I'm not even willing to go there. That is way too much. Michelle is talking about all this stuff. I ain't willing to do all of that yet. Yeah, I know this has been a long journey for me. I started this journey face down, drunk, crying in '06.
Mm.
This
Mhm.
is 2025.
Mhm.
We have to give ourselves this time to just really spend that, to go inward, loving ourselves, throwing away things that no longer serve us.
Yeah. I and it's a again, like, I just keep thinking about coming home because even these wisdoms that you're saying that we are fine we're rediscovering them, right? Like, we are rediscovering spirit and chakra and power. We knew that words were powerful because they killed us when we wanted to try and learn
Right.
how to read and how to write. We know these things and we're coming home to this knowledge, I think, for me, with just different eyes, with a different
Absolutely.
perspective, on this side of fatigue.
Hmm.
Um, and so I want to end with talking about abundance.
Hmm.
Because all of this isn't for naught, right? This isn't just so we can, I don't know, realize that we were traumatized in a hospital room.
Right.
This is so that we can move through whatever is holding us in these cycles. And for me, it's cycles of, I don't know, I don't too many to name. It's cycles that make me tired, okay? That make me tired and that aren't great for my health, so that we can be our most abundant selves. And so I wonder for you, what is your hope, your wish for Black women,
Mhm.
as we spend 2025 saying no to you, but yes to me? What
I,
what is your wish?
Thank you for asking that question. Abundance is, I had to reflect on that. My program that I created is called Healing to Create Abundance. And when I thought of that title, I was asking myself, what is my purpose here? What's the point of me even starting this business, making these programs? I originally thought it was, I want to have money, you know. So then I asked
Mhm,
myself, why do you want money? What does money give you? I grew up, I had money. Money didn't serve me. I mean, it is, you have it, it's gone. You buy something and you may have it later. So I really wanted to be clear of abundance and what the definition was. And it's like, what would you want to have in surplus? And when I really reflected on that word, the only thing that I could think about was generational healing,
mm,
where I was wanting to connect to, if I could have an abundance of anything, that
mm.
healing, that ability to have the awareness when I see something in me show up that I don't want to be present, having that awareness, that wherewithal to be like, it's okay. Being able to show up in a room of white people and hold my head held high and not allow the words that you say. I'm tired of feeling uncomfortable in a room with people and they're talking about things, not realizing that they're poking fun of something that is meaningful to me, that impacts me. I want to hold my head high and not be ashamed, right? So how do I get there? What does abundance like that feel like? And that's when healing started. And that's when I started learning and researching. And I said, "Ooh, if I had abundance of healing, I could share more." Do you know
Yeah.
what I can do if I'm showing up a healed person? Do you know the things that I would be able, life is still going to be able to happen, but I will be able to handle it in ways that I couldn't even fathom. And when that money comes, I'll be able to handle it in a way that I know that's in alignment with me. So that is what abundance really
Mm,
came to just be in my eyes, is like that ability to have that awareness, understand that my beliefs create my reality and I can change the reality of what I have because that's the power in it. My emotion is energy in motion.
Mm.
So if am I aware of that? If I feel this burst of energy, I know what to do with it. It's not anything bad. Stop telling me it's bad. I'm just going to find a different way to outsource it, right? This knowledge, that abundant knowledge, baby, that's better than any money I can have. So that's what it is for me. And that's what
Wow.
I hope to give to people.
Yeah. Thank you. Michelle, can you tell us where folks can find you?
Yeah, so you can find me at michellehoughton.com, Life After Loss Academy LLC. I do have a Calendly. If you want to work with me, if you want to know more information about the programs that I offer, I'm getting ready to launch a self-led program. So it's more of a condensed version where you work on your own pace. There's a workbook that's attached to it. If you want to do more of that intensive work, like we were talking about, I'd offer group. And the reason why I do group is because, baby, we can sharpen one another so much with our stories and uplift. And there's so much power in a group. So I do offer group and individual, because some people just want to work one-on-one because they're like, I don't know if I want to share my story with everyone. So
Mhm.
that is also an option. And so I always offer an encouragement call so we can just make sure my program is good for that person I'm speaking to. One of the things that I want to, other places you can, before I say that, let me say this. And you can also find me on hopefully TikTok. We might hopefully still have TikTok. I don't know. But the Real Purple Michelle on TikTok. All of my social medias are the same. It's my name, michellehoughton.com. So Facebook, um, Instagram, that's where you can find me. But I do have something special for just your listeners too.
Oh,
So
awesome. Yes, let's hear it.
all right. So here's the thing, though. It's a twofer. So you're only eligible to receive it. You do have a wonderful bi-weekly newsletter. So in order to be eligible for this, you have to be a part of the newsletter. So I'm sorry. So you have to subscribe. But I offer a workbook that coincides with my program that you can do on your own. It has a lot of the skill sets that we were talking about as a tracker. So you can be aware of your triggers and you can keep track of the
Wow.
things that you want to work on. I'm going to gift that to only the subscribers. So if you're listening at this time, they will have access to that workbook. It's a digital workbook. So even though you're feeling you might not be ready to commit, we're going to make sure that you have something that you can definitely do today. So
Awesome. Thank you so much. So, yes, subscribe to the newsletter if you have not already. You can do so at www.impostrixpodcast.com, and we'll get that out to you shortly. Thank you so much for joining me, Michelle.
absolutely. Thank you, Whitney, for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Impostrix Podcast. I hope that you got what you needed. If you're ready for more, feel free to go through the other 3 seasons worth of amazing episodes that we've put together for you. I want to hear from you. I want to know how you related to this episode. So if you're listening on Spotify, feel free to answer the question or send a text. You can do that through your Spotify app. If you're listening elsewhere, make sure that you follow me on Instagram at Impostrix Podcast. And if you like to text, go ahead, go to the show notes, look for the link for the WhatsApp community, because we just got it started this season for season 4, and I love to chat, so hit me up. Also, thank you to Chris at Digital REM for editing this episode. Until next time, be validated.